I'm so excited to be welcoming Joanna Penn. Joanna Penn is an award-nominated New York Times and USA Today bestselling author of thrillers under the pen name J.F. Penn, and also writes nonfiction for authors. She's a podcaster and an award-winning creative entrepreneur. Her site, thecreativepenn.com, has been voted in the top 100 sites for writers by Writer's Digest and rated as the #1 site for writers by yours truly. So, Joanna, it is so exciting to have you on.
Oh, thanks so much, Dave. I'm excited to be here and talk about all this stuff.
So I've actually been following you for years, though not maybe following is the wrong word. Like just as recently as yesterday, I had a question about writing. I had a question about distributing books in Germany, literally. And I put in a Google search and what comes up but the Creative Penn at the top there. And so it's not like I follow you. Like I don't go to the webpage and read every article you write or listen to every podcast you do. I usually start with a search about something I need to know. And more often than not, the site that I find is yours.
That's what happens after a decade of blogging and podcasting on the same topic.
Exactly.
I do try to be useful.
So I've actually learned a ton of useful information from you over the years. And I've learned a lot about intellectual property and different ways of packaging my books and putting them out to the world. And so when I thought about that, I wanted to talk to somebody about intellectual property and figuring out like who is somebody who's doing it, who knows a lot of these aspects. I had thought of you and you're like, no, you should speak to an attorney who can, read chapter and verse and tell you all the pertinent laws about this. And I'm like, please, I really just want somebody who's out there doing it. I know that because you're an author and you're not also a musician and also a painter and also these other things, that you're not going to have your hands in every area of intellectual property. But I really thought it'd be great for people to hear from somebody who's out there working in intellectual property and building up income sources based on her intellectual property, how she's doing it. And, even if somebody's not an author themselves, I think they can really see, okay, there's an absolute parallel here in music. There's a parallel here in art, and they can extrapolate in all the different ways that they can similarly build passive or incremental income sources through their intellectual property as well. So I'm really excited to be digging in with you.
Oh, sure. And I think for anyone listening and they're like, what, you're an author and you're doing intellectual property? I think many people at the beginning, if they're writing books or considering writing books, they don't even think of their books as intellectual property. Someone will say, I'm writing a book, or, I'm writing a novel, and they won't necessarily consider it as that future business, because the words intellectual property are businessy, they're entrepreneurially, they're financial independency. And many people, when they've got that creative hat on, they struggle to think of it in terms of IP. So we'll use IP during this chat. But I think this is so important. And obviously we're talking about wealth, about money, and these are difficult topics for many creatives. But if you can, as a creative, if you can really understand IP, and it's not that hard to understand, and you can understand licensing, that can make you money for the rest of your life. But also with copyright, which is, the type of IP authors have, can be 50 to 70 years after you die. And this is what's so crazy. I think people don't forget that. But with thinking about our wealth and passing on our wealth along, think of the estates like the Tolkien estate with Lord of the Rings.
Right.
And even, James Bond with Ian Fleming, or, these Enid Blyton, I think, is a fantastic one in the children's space. These are names and estates that have gone on after the death of the author. Obviously, we're not dead yet, so we're writing a lot and we want to make money while we're alive. But equally, it's so powerful. So I want people right at the top of this interview to think, okay, we are talking about the business side of being a creative in this, and about this idea of IP.
Absolutely. And it's very interesting what you say about how most people don't think of this as intellectual property. When I was in law school, the most sought after students were those who came into law school with science backgrounds, because of the IP space. The IP space, needed people who can get their heads around these scientific questions. And the IP lawyers were always trying to find somebody who had a chemistry background or an engineering background, so they could be looking at these patents and they could be really understanding what everything was different. And exactly, it never occurred to me to think of IP in this way as books. And most people that I think of as when they think of their intellectual property, most people I know who are writing books, and it seems like everybody I know is writing a book or has written a book, but most of them seem to think about publishers. They most think about somebody to take on their IP and, okay, I write a book and I pass it over to somebody else. And, I've had offers from publishers, and just the idea, and I feel like I put my heart and soul into my books, and the idea of passing over really ownership, it's not technically ownership, but it's so much control, it's so much ownership, it's over the property. Like I've never been able to do it. I've never been able to sign a deal with a publisher. I've never been able to release even one iota of ownership over anything that I've created. And that might be short-sighted. And
I was going to say,
agents have told me that it was.
Control freakery there. But maybe we should break down what this is for people, because I think it's hard for people to get their head around. So obviously you mentioned patents. That's on the scientific side, but in the arts with copyright over your words. So you don't have to register copyright. It is inherent in your finished written product. And once you understand that, it's about licensing. So I think many people talk about selling their books, but actually what you're generally doing is licensing your intellectual property rights. And that's what your contract, whether you sign a publisher or if you self-publish on KDP, you're still licensing part of your copyright to a publisher of some kind. So let's just break it down in terms of the basics. So first of all, territory. So you're in Israel as we speak. I'm in Britain. So one example of licensing by territory would be my book, Gates of Hell, which, as we've discussed, is set in a lot in Israel. I would love to license that to Israel, to the country of Israel, or the Hebrew language, worldwide Hebrew. I am never going to be able to do worldwide Hebrew books on my own, right? That's just not something I'm going to do on my own. So that would be country or language. So this is a big thing. Many authors listening, depending where you are in the world, if you have signed a contract, you may have signed it for, let's say, UK Commonwealth, but not for the US or Canada. You may have signed US Canada, but not for the rest of the world. Or you might have signed worldwide English, but not Hebrew or German or different languages. So those are two examples of different slices. So think of it as slicing and dicing. Then if you think about formats, so both you and I were very digitally savvy. You know that you can upload and publish an ebook globally yourself very, very easily now and make money that way. But if I wanted to get a physical book in a bookstore in America, or, in India, for example, it's much better for me to license print rights within that territory. Now, I could keep print on demand rights, but licensing a print run within a territory can be another way. Another one would be audiobooks. So
can you really get a deal like that? Like what you're saying makes so much sense to me in theory, but the idea of, like, for me, I'd love to have a publisher take my books and distribute it to bookstores. But to me, like, the idea of giving them sales over Amazon, well, I can get those as easily as they can. So maybe I should keep publishing on demand, or I should keep the ebook rights. But whenever publishers want your book, they're like, no, we want all the things that we can do better than you and the things that you can do just as well as we can. We want you to sign over all of it. Have you ever seen rights that allow you to keep things like the publishing on demand, but having print runs?
Absolutely. This is more and more common, but it's about the empowerment of the author to actually negotiate a contract. And, you're a lawyer, you understand this. A contract, when someone gives you a contract, that is not the thing you sign. You negotiate the contract. And this is what authors are not used to doing. They think, or my agent is meant to do that. But many authors who are more empowered about their IP and even just read their contract or try and understand it. And it's also about power, and it's about confidence. So if you know you can do this, then you can argue it. So audio rights, which I was going to come to, is a really important one. Most contracts, as you say, from a publisher are going to say all formats, all territories, all languages for the life of copyright, which, as we said, is 70 years after you die. And here's $2,000 US. And you're going to go, no, thank you. How about print only in the US for 20 years? or 7 years or whatever. So yes, you can, and I know so many writers. I'm doing it. For example, I've licensed some South Korean print only rights.
Wow.
Yeah, within South Korea. I'm never going to do that myself, am I? So this is the thing. You have to consider what can you do yourself if you want to, and what is best to work with other people. And then if you think about someone like J.K. Rowling, if you look at the ebooks of Harry Potter, they are published by her company Pottermore, because she kept those rights. And when Bloomsbury said, "Oh, hey, by the way, why didn't you just sign this addendum giving us your ebook rights?" And she was like, no, I'm going to do those myself, and set up Pottermore in order to do that. So that was, yeah, I mean, these things are happening. So what I want people to think is your copyright is not one thing. Your book is not one thing. It might be one original text, but you can slice and dice that in so many different ways. And then, I mean, we haven't even talked about subsidiary rights and all the other things that you can possibly do with your intellectual property. But I want people to think about the value that is in there. And the other thing is, okay, so we're in a difficult time as we record this, with the pandemic, and what people are finding is pandemic books are either flying off the shelves or they're not. But what if you've written a pandemic book and nobody wants it right now? Well, give it 10 years, it's going to come around again. So you could think about what could, this is what I want people to think, this long-term idea of your content, and that's why keeping control of it or getting rights reverted is really important. And then you can change that into other streams of income at different points in your author career. So I mean, we've hardly even got into it. It's almost uncountable how many things you can slice and dice your copyright into. But so what do you think about that, about licensing the rights?
So I think that's absolutely fabulous. And that's really what I've always looked at as the ideals. I'd love the idea of working with a publishing company on specifically the areas where they have expertise. And, getting into bookstores in the US is something I've never successfully done, because it's so much based on relationships and it's based on the promotional materials and all of that. But such a huge percentage of sales between the paperback books that are printing on demand through Amazon and the ebooks that are exclusively through Amazon and some of these other portals, such a huge percentage of book sales I can get into myself without having to give away any rights at all. And, whenever I've dealt with any publisher conversations, it was always an all or nothing type thing. And they wanted to pay me very, very little. And it was like really signing away full ownership over my product. And that's what I didn't want to be doing. So I started looking into, okay, what are things I can do all on my own? But it seems like the more influence you get, like if you were having this conversation with Stephen King instead of with me, and he said, okay, I want to have a contract that is just for this rights, just for bookstores in the US, only print and run. It seems like, okay, he's got so much power because he's such a name and so many people will go out and buy his books. But it seems like for myself, I'm more of an unknown author. I don't have that much influence. I'd be afraid that a publisher would say, well, you know what? You're not worth the effort for the small amount that you're giving us. Go out and sell 1 million books and then we'll talk.
Yeah, well, and that's the power differential. But again, this is about having a career. If you're going to be an author, then for the long term, then you're looking at numbers like that. It's not, and there's no, your book, the Cash Machine book, or even your fiction, your prophecy books, those, stories don't age. And it may be at some point you're like, here's my sales record, and you're pitching. I mean, maybe, I don't know, a big book takes off, or like, for me, my books are similar to sort of the Dan Brown Da Vinci Code. Dan Brown puts out another book, publishers go looking and go, oh, hey, look at this backlist, look at these sales, and then you're ready to talk. Or you pitch people, so you go find publishers who publish other books in that niche in a country like Poland, for example, which is got an interesting religious history, and you pitch these books, or you pitch the financial books, and with a package. And this is the thing, I think, again, this is this business idea as opposed to the creative side of your brain, it's okay, well, how could I be my own agent if you're interested in doing that? The other opinion is I'm just going to write my books and eventually people will come to me, which is how I think about it. I make enough good money from my books in English, in ebook, print and audio, that people come to me to license my rights. So that's probably what I would consider. But the other thing about publishers is sometimes people have a goal other than income, and I think that's important. So, for example, in the financial independence area, some people, or just entrepreneurial area, some people might want to be a speaker. And if you're a speaker, then having a traditionally published book by a big brand publisher, I don't know, like a Wiley in a non-fiction space, then that might be something worth doing in order to have this nice hardback edition with a whatever cover and Wiley on the back, and that you hand out, and then that might impact your speaking income, as opposed to how I make a living with books, which is a lot of more about sales. So the other thing might be if you want to win an award. So if you want to win an award, sometimes they're not even open if you independently publish. So you might want to go with a traditional publisher for those reasons. So, but as you say, finding publishers or agents who only want to do selective licensing up until recently has been more difficult, but that is changing because people are realizing very much that this is important.
It's fascinating what you say about being a speaker. Because for me, that actually kind of cuts the other direction. So, take my wife's got a nonfiction book, for example, and her book is directly leading into her coaching that she offers. So here she is, she's got a book, and the book is really, to a certain extent, like an extended business card, because she teaches these 22 tools for how to get control of your thinking. And in it, she gives examples of these different tools, and for each one, she'll have like a dialogue that she's done with a client, and so you actually get to see how this tool works. So by the time you finish this book, you really know exactly what it'd be like to work with her. It's a great way of getting people excited. But what we do that a publisher probably wouldn't be happy with at all is we're really happy to give the book away. It's a free download, and we're putting out there, you'll get the book for free in exchange for giving us an email address. And so we're now in communication with you, and we're not looking to make any money on the book whatsoever. And so I'd kind of think that if you're looking to build a career other than as a writer, if you're looking for income sources other than as a writer, that might actually push you the other direction towards self-publishing, because no publisher is going to allow you to just give away the books for free. It's going to totally undermine, the amount of money they can be making on them. And of course, if you have to buy the hard copy books yourself, and publishers charge authors, even the author themselves of the books, they have to pay a pretty dear penny to buy their own copies of their own book if they want to give them away. So like if you publish yourself, you can get the books dirt cheap, and you can just give away the ebooks, and you can use it to be promoting, the next thing you want to be selling, whatever product it is you want to be promoting.
Yeah, I would say that is a lead generation model. I give books away. I give fiction away. My book Stone of Fire, and also nonfiction successful self-publishing. Those are free books that bring people into my business and my ecosystem. But in the other example, many people will expect to, will want to get a traditional book, knowing that it won't make them any money, but it will bring in a different audience. So
it's also credibility. Having that big name on your book, right?
Exactly, but it's also you can reach a different audience if you're in, say, airport bookstores than you can if you're giving them away online. So what we want to think, I think the concept of ecosystem is what's important here. And I've got like 35 books or something now, and 2 podcasts and websites here, there, and everywhere, and email lists, like you do. This ecosystem. And
what is ecosystem? What does that stand for?
Ecosystem, ECO system.
Okay.
It's all these things work together. So it's not like, I just make money from one book, or I just make money from one podcast, or I just make money from speaking or consulting, like your wife. It's an entire ecosystem that brings different streams of income from these different places, and people enter into, some people call it like a funnel, but I think of a funnel as one direction, whereas to me the ecosystem is people come in here, come in there, and you don't know how people find you, but eventually they'll spend some money. And that's how I think of my books as well, is that someone might pick up this book and then eventually buy a different thing, or they might click on a link and go to an affiliate offer. So all of it sort of works together. But the main question for people to think about, people listening, or for you to think about with any book is, what is this for? Is this to make money? Is this as a lead gen? Is this to win a prize or try and win a prize? You can't guarantee that, obviously. Is this to, for example, I'm about to start writing book 11 of my Arcane series, Tree of Life, which is based on the Etzheim Synagogue in Amsterdam. And that's book 11 in a series. So my goal with that book is to deliver another book to the people who love that series. And I know I'll make money from that, but it's very clear that that's a different angle than my last nonfiction book, Audio for Authors, which was, an entirely different audience, different income streams, different function than a novel. So the question of, what is the purpose of this book? How am I going to sell it? How am I going to license it? How am I going to market it? Those are the business questions behind the creative side.
Absolutely. Just yesterday, like I said, I did a Google search. So what I was searching for, I was debating the wisdom of putting out one of my books in German, actually. And one of the things that had occurred to me was that there are so many of these different, each country has its own way that people buy books, and, my ability to work in a foreign country would be very difficult. But then it occurred to me that any country that has Amazon printing on demand. So for anyone who doesn't know, literally someone will go into Amazon, they'll order a copy of a book. Amazon will print one copy of the book and ship that out. So any country that has that service existing in it, I realized, well, maybe that's a game changer. So rather than thinking about some countries where there isn't that technology, and I don't have that easy ability to get in there, so I'd have to really sell my rights in that country if I wanted to get there. But any place that had Amazon, I was thinking, well, maybe it would make sense to actually hang on to those countries and pay for translation. We're doing that now. 2 of our books are just about to get released in Spanish. And my wife's from Colombia, so we have a lot of connections in the Spanish community, and she also does her coaching in Spanish when necessary. So you've got Amazon, who it's in Spain, that can be printing it and shipping it out. They've got the ebooks over there. So starting to think about what are different countries and which places does it make sense to be releasing rights for, to be signing off and giving someone else control over it, and which countries is the technology changing such that we can actually retain the rights and still get the books out there, because things like Amazon are being game changers.
Yeah, and I'd also add, with countries like Germany, Spain, Italy, France, part of the pandemic, the result of the pandemic is those countries have been quite slow with digital transformation. So they've been resistant to reading ebooks. The pandemic has accelerated the adoption of digital reading and online ordering in Europe to like a massive scale. So this is very exciting for those of us who publish online. The other thing I'd say is that Amazon's advertising also has auto-generated ads, which I'm using for my books in German, and they're generating profits, and you don't even have to touch anything. Because it's very hard to advertise in a language that you don't speak. I don't speak German. I have books in German, so I just run Amazon ads with the automatic targeting, and Amazon just does it for me. So it is an incredibly crazy time in terms of publishing and book marketing. And yeah, there are so many opportunities. And yeah, as you say, you have to think, like, let's take Japanese, for example. I would love to license my books to Japan in Japanese. I'm never going to do that myself either. So I think definitely with these foreign rights and foreign languages, we should be thinking about that. But your wife is a Spanish speaker, us as English speakers, why not hold the rights to languages that you can at least market in yourself and that are big digital markets, and think about licensing the rest, basically.
Also, now, when I talked to you about saying, okay, I really like this idea of talking about intellectual property as a passive income source, you were like, no, it is not passive. It is not passive at all. It's scalable income instead. And that was a very important distinction for you. So can you talk a bit about that?
Yeah, sure. Well, to me, the word passive means like lying by the beach, reading a book, or doing whatever you're doing. But passive means you don't have to do anything for your money. So as part of our, financial independence journey, many of us invest in index funds, and they, hopefully over time, with all the things that hopefully will happen, they will bring in money, and at some point we'll start taking that income, and all we'll have to do is spend a little bit of time doing the rebalancing and stuff. So that money is, to me, the passive side, is the investment side. But books, so there's a couple of things with books. One, you have to market your books. If you've been on the Kindle store lately, for example, you might have noticed that there are like 20 million books or something. Hundreds of thousands of books are published every week now, more and more and more, with the rise of AI generated text and all this type of stuff. So you have to market your books, and that is not a passive job at all. Even if you say you use the automated Amazon ads, for example, you still have to go in and monitor them and do your, potentially tweaking it like we do in English. I podcast, that is certainly not passive work to market my nonfiction. And then with nonfiction, you generally have to update your books. So they are not evergreen at all. I've done three editions of my How to Market a Book, and I'm going to have to do another one soon. How to Make a Living with Your Writing, that's on its like fourth edition or something. As I mentioned to you, successful self-publishing, things change all the time. I have to keep updating that. So nonfiction books age unless they are mindset based. But even then, I mean, you and I have read many of the financial independence mindset books that are a bit older now, and you can really tell that a lot of them really age and could do with an update. So, and with fiction, you generally have to update your back matter. You will likely update your covers. All of publishing updates covers every decade or something. So you have to manage your IP in the same way if you had physical property. So let's say you're in physical property doing rentals, you have to manage that. Even if you have a property manager, you still have to make sure that business runs. So I think that thinking of books as scalable income is important. And that to me means I create it once and then I can sell it over and over and over again. So the work is done, the main work is done once, but I have to keep pushing the wheelbarrow as such. I've been pushing the wheel. Whereas with our investments, hopefully the workload is less over time. So that's why it's so important to me as a creative entrepreneur investor is to take a percentage of my income from book sales and funnel that into my investments so that over time I am going to make another income stream from that. And we all, that's part of what your conference and your information is about. So yeah, I definitely think, please talk about books as scalable, not passive.
Yeah, the whole idea of what is passive is really a funny question. So for instance, my core business is actually something that is legally considered to be passive. When I file my taxes, the IRS looks at my main business as passive because it's something that I sell products online. I work maybe a half hour a day on the business. It's not something I have to devote a lot of time to. And there are certain criteria. Other people basically I'm able to create systems. Other people are to take them and run the day-to-day operations of the business. And I kind of go in, I do little tweaks here and there. And it's always a question, like people ask me, well, are you financially independent? And well, it depends. Is my core business passive? It's officially passive. But I tend to look at my financial independence journey as I like to exclude that income. And I say, okay, I want to be financially independent minus my core business. Even though right now I don't devote much time to it, that I kind of look at my goal as being financially independent beyond that core business, because that can change. And like you say, things in the writing world change. Did you tend to look at any of your book revenue as contributing to your financial independence goals, or is that just a totally separate category for you and you only look at your index funds and that type of thing as being I only look, at the FI number that people have. I only look at my investment income and the cash. I total up the assets in cash. I don't
total up my intellectual property assets. I could, if, and I have said in my estate management plan, if I died, my assets would be my books and they would be totaled up and packaged potentially. But, for now, my number is only my investment numbers and other cash streams and other things like that, actual cash in bank. But my business, I consider the engine that fuels my investments. The other thing is I will never be a passive person, as you're not. The fact that you've got
Right.
this one stream of income, that doesn't mean you're sitting around drinking pina coladas or whatever. That, we like to work, and I think that's true of most people in this niche, actually. So you end up doing something else, like a podcast, or you help other people with their financial independence, or whatever else you want to do, write more books for fun. And I think how I see financial independence is that I don't have to do any of that. So it's almost like the money from books would last a couple of years without me doing anything. But in order to keep it going, I definitely have to push it a bit. So I think of it as the engine that drives financial independence, as opposed to that. And I mean, we may speak again in however long it takes me to get to my number, and I might have changed my opinion, but I'm not there yet. But I'm very happy being a writer as well. So I'm not sure I'm going to stop that even when I get there. But right now I don't include it.
Which is funny. For me, it's the exact opposite, actually. I don't include my core business when I think about my financial independence number, because really my core business is something that is only existing for me to bring in income. It's not something I have a huge passion about. Mm-hmm. I sell products that I'm able to make a living on. And I'm able to create the system so I could work so little on that so that I can devote myself to my passions. Mm-hmm. And part of what I'm looking for is getting to that date when my passions themselves produce enough income. My completely passive investments and the money that's coming from my passions, when those get together and cover my cost of living, that to me is going to be a level of financial independence. So because regardless of how much money I'm making, I never want to stop working in those. Mm-hmm. I do consider that income to be income that is helping me get passive, to be helping me get independent of having to have another income source. Let's put it that way. If we look at financial independence as, okay, I am independent of having to do any work that is not completely in line with my passion and my life's mission.
So, that's interesting. And I think the difference is that I created a business around my passion. So exactly. I love what I do every day. So I never want to stop doing it anyway. Isn't that interesting? And that's really good. Like, for people listening, you can have your own decision. You can make your own definition of what these things are. I guess for me, it's more like what if I get sick? Or when I am old, because let's face it, we are all going to, hopefully we're going to get old, and hopefully we will be at that point where it would be nice to not have to work as hard if we don't want to, or if we get sick, or if our family needs us more, or whatever. Those are the things I think I'm working towards. But it's lovely. It's actually lovely that we both have different definitions. We don't need to talk about numbers, but we all live in different places. We have different needs. So everyone's number is different as well, which I think that's what's nice about the FI movement. There are a lot of different people doing a lot of different things.
Absolutely. So thank you so much. I've gotten so many ideas from you. I'm actually really excited to kind of go and look into a number of these things and be implementing some of them myself. There's a little bit of you're a selfish choice, to be talking about intellectual property, because there's a whole bunch of people I could talk to about it, but you're actually somebody who's in the area that I'm in and who I wanted to be learning from. So I really got a ton out of that. Please tell people, how can they learn more about you and learn more about all these ideas you have to teach?
Well, if you like podcasts, come to the Creative Penn podcast and thecreativepenn.com, pen with a double N. You can get all my books, and there's a free blueprint. There's just loads and loads of stuff. And I'm on Twitter at the Creative Penn if you have any questions. And the Creative Penn is spelled with 2 N's as her last name for anyone who's looking for that. And it's my real name. I am actually a pen. I was born for it.
So her pen name is, we actually do. JF Penn is a pen,
Yes,
is a pen
it's
name.
it's my separate brand. I've got JF. I write thrillers as JF Penn, Joe Francis, and non-fiction as Joanna Penn. So you can find my books all the usual places.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much, and thank you so much for putting out all this incredible information. Like I said, whenever I've got a question on books and intellectual property and how to be putting them up there and different ideas, like yesterday when I wanted to find about selling in Germany and I would just go to Google, I seem to wind up at the Creative Pen and just this absolute wealth of information you've put out there. So thank you for all that you provide for all
And
of us.
thanks for having me, Dave. That was great.
It's been so great having you.